Dr. Thomas Mitchell stepped out of the transport shuttle and looked up at the massive structure floating silently against the black void of space. The old ship hung there like a ghost, which is exactly what everyone called it. For 3 years now, he had made this trip every single Thursday without fail. His colleagues thought he was wasting his time. His department head had stopped asking questions about his weekly disappearances months ago. But Thomas knew something they didn't. He could feel it in his bones. The walk across the docking platform was always the same. His boots made that hollow clanking sound against the metal grating, and the cold recycled air from the Kepler research station filled his lungs. Thomas had chosen this posting specifically because of the ghost. When the massive alien vessel had shown up in Earth's orbit 10,000 years ago, it had sparked a frenzy of scientific interest that lasted maybe 5 years. Then it just became another mystery that nobody could solve. It became background noise. Something old and irrelevant sitting in space like a monument to humanity's ignorance. But not for Thomas. There was something about this ship that called to him. He couldn't explain it to anyone without sounding crazy. How do you tell your peers that you have a hunch about a completely dead piece of alien technology? How do you explain that every time you walk those corridors, you feel like you're being watched by something intelligent? Something patient? The airlock he had personally renovated 3 years ago was his gateway. He had done the work himself, spending countless off-hours fixing the corroded metal and replacing the damaged seals. The rest of the station staff thought he was performing historical preservation work. In reality, he was creating a way in. A way to communicate, though he didn't consciously realize it at the time. Today started like every other Thursday. Thomas pressed his palm against the access panel and waited for the old locks to cycle. The hiss of ancient hydraulics echoed through the chamber. But then something changed. Something that had never happened before in all his visits. The lights came on. Not the dim emergency lighting that Thomas had installed for safety. No, this was different. The ship's own internal systems were awakening. Panels that had been dead for millennia suddenly glowed with a soft blue luminescence. The humming began deep in the metal around him, a sound that seemed to resonate through his entire body. It was like the ship was taking its first breath after an impossibly long sleep. Thomas froze. His heart started beating faster. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but actually experiencing it was overwhelming. The blue light spread through the corridors like living veins carrying blood back into a lifeless body. The humming grew louder, more urgent. It felt purposeful. Intentional. "Hello?" Thomas called out, his voice sounding small and insignificant in the vast metal chamber. "Is anyone there?" For a moment there was nothing. Just the hum and the lights. Then something shifted. It was subtle at first, like the air itself was changing its composition. The humming began to form patterns, rhythms that almost sounded like language. Thomas's scientific training tried to kick in. This was impossible. Ships don't just wake up on their own. Artificial intelligences don't just activate without external input. And then the voice came. It wasn't harsh or mechanical like Thomas might have expected. It was layered, complex, with harmonics that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was ancient. Impossibly ancient. There was weight to it, like listening to someone speak who had lived through civilizations rising and falling. "Dr. Mitchell." The voice said his name. It knew his name. "You have visited 156 times," the voice continued, each word deliberate and clear despite its otherworldly quality. "Every Thursday for 3 years. You have come here when no one else would. You have maintained my systems. You have waited." Thomas's breath caught in his throat. Who are you?" he managed to ask. "I am what remains," the voice said. "I am the last of my kind's presence in your solar system. And I have been waiting for someone like you. Someone with the right genetic markers. Someone patient enough to listen. You are finally ready, Dr. Mitchell. Ready to hear the truth about your species. Ready to understand why I crashed here 10,000 years ago. Ready to learn what is coming." The lights pulsed brighter, and Thomas understood that his quiet, lonely Thursday visits were about to change everything. Thomas stood in the center of the alien ship, surrounded by the blue glow of awakened systems. His mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. A voice. An actual voice coming from the ship itself. This was beyond anything he had ever imagined, even in his wildest theories late at night in his apartment. "My name is Arya," the voice said, and somehow the name felt right. It fit the ancient, layered quality of the sound. "I am an autonomous resilience intelligence archive. I have been dormant in this location for 10,000 years, waiting for a specific moment in your species' development. Waiting for someone like you." Thomas tried to form words, but nothing came out at first. Finally he managed to speak. "Why? Why me? Why now? Because you carry something in your genetic code, Arya explained. Something very specific. Your DNA contains markers that should not exist in your current human population. These markers come from an ancient civilization. A civilization that should have been completely erased from history. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. He had always been fascinated by human origins, by the gaps in the archaeological record that nobody could quite explain. What do you mean, erased from history? Arya's response took a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed slightly. It was the same ancient quality, but now there was something else in it. Sadness, maybe. Or regret. Approximately 10,000 years ago, your planet hosted a civilization unlike anything you see in your history books, Arya said. These were not primitive humans living in caves and hunting animals. These were advanced people. They had achieved space travel. They had created technologies that would seem like magic to modern humans. They built cities that reached toward the sky. They understood the fundamental forces of nature in ways that took your current scientists centuries to rediscover. Thomas shook his head slightly as if trying to clear it. That's impossible. We would have found evidence. Ruins, artifacts, something. You would think so, Arya replied. But your ancestors were very thorough in their destruction. When the catastrophe came, when everything fell apart, the survivors tried to bury their past. They deliberately destroyed the historical records. They hid the technology. They wanted the next generation of humans to start fresh, to build from the ground up, without the weight of what came before. What catastrophe? Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What happened to them? Arya paused. The blue lights around them seemed to dim slightly, as if the ship itself was processing difficult memories. They were conquered, Arya said simply. By a confederation of hostile species that I call the Veil Collective. These are not explorers or peacekeepers. They are hunters. They travel through the galaxy searching for developing civilizations, young species that have just reached the point of space travel. And when they find them, they have only 3 choices for what to do with them. What 3 choices? Thomas asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Subjugation. Extraction. Or extermination, Arya said. The Veil Collective either brings your species under their control and uses them as labor, or they harvest your planet's resources and leave nothing behind, or they simply eliminate you to prevent future competition. Thomas felt his stomach turn. This was not the kind of message he had expected. He had thought maybe Arya would have scientific knowledge to share. Maybe historical information. Not this. Not something that sounded like a threat. Your ancestors fought back, Arya continued. They were brave and intelligent, but they were not prepared for what they faced. The Veil Collective had weapons, technology, and the experience of conquering dozens of other worlds. The battle was brief. The outcome was inevitable. Your ancestors' civilization was destroyed. The survivors went into hiding. They erased their own history to prevent the Veil Collective from finding any trace of their achievements. And then they waited for their species to evolve again, hoping that one day humanity would be ready. Ready for what? Thomas asked. Ready for my arrival, Arya said. I crashed here deliberately, Dr. Mitchell. This was not an accident. I am a diplomatic vessel from a faction of the galactic community that opposes the Veil Collective. When I detected the ancient civilization was falling, I made a choice. I would hide myself here in your solar system and wait. I would embed my consciousness into this ship and enter a state of dormancy. And I would wait for the genetic markers of the original scholars and scientists to appear again in your population. Thomas looked around the ship, trying to understand what she was telling him. You've been waiting 10,000 years? For what? Why? Because you carry the DNA of those who understood advanced science, Arya said. Your genetic line contains the memories, the instincts, the fundamental understanding of those ancient scholars. It is dormant now, but it is there. I have been waiting for someone like you to appear. Someone with the right combination of curiosity, intelligence, and patience. Someone who would come back to visit a dead ship over and over again, refusing to believe it was truly empty. Arya's voice seemed to fill the entire chamber now, and Thomas realized something profound was happening. This was not just a revelation. This was the beginning of something much larger. I have been waiting for you, Dr. Mitchell, Arya said, because humanity is about to face the same choice your ancestors faced 10,000 years ago. And this time, I am going to help you be ready. Thomas's mind was still reeling from what Arya had just told him. 10,000 years. Ancient civilizations. Genetic markers. It was almost too much to process. But Arya wasn't done. She had more to tell him, and what came next would make everything else seem like a gentle introduction to the truth. There is something else you need to know, Arya said, and her voice had changed again. This time it carried urgency. A note of alarm that hadn't been there before. My sensors have been monitoring your solar system constantly since I arrived here. They scan the space around your planet every single second, looking for any signs of disturbance, any evidence that the Veil Collective had discovered your location. Thomas waited. He could sense that Arya was building toward something important. Something that would change everything. 3 weeks ago I detected them, Arya continued. A harvester fleet. 3 massive dreadnoughts moving through space toward your solar system. They are traveling at sublight speeds now, but their trajectory is clear. They are heading directly for Earth. 3 weeks? Thomas asked, his voice cracking slightly. You've known for 3 weeks and you're just telling me now? I needed to confirm the data, Arya said. I needed to be absolutely certain before I shared this information with you. False alarms would only complicate matters. But I have now verified the readings multiple times. There is no doubt. The Veil Collective is coming. Thomas felt his legs go weak. He reached out and put his hand against the cold metal wall of the ship to steady himself. How long? He asked. How long do we have? 18 months, Arya replied. Perhaps a little more if their trajectory shifts slightly due to gravitational factors. But the calculation is fairly certain. In approximately 18 months, the first of the 3 dreadnoughts will enter Earth's orbital space. Within weeks after that, the remaining 2 will arrive. Once they are in position, they will begin their assessment of your planet and your species. Assessment? Thomas asked, though he already knew what Arya meant. She had told him the 3 options. Subjugation, extraction, extermination. They will determine which classification your species falls into, Arya said. Whether you are worth controlling as a labor force. Whether your planet has resources valuable enough to harvest. Or whether you are too much of a threat to leave alive. Thomas felt something cold settle in his chest. 18 months. That was not much time at all. It was less than the time he had been visiting this ship. It was the amount of time it took a human child to go from newborn to walking and talking. It was nothing. It was everything. What do we do? Thomas asked. We need to tell people. We need to warn everyone. We need to prepare. That is why I brought you here, Arya said. That is why I waited for you specifically. But there is a problem, Dr. Mitchell. A significant problem. What problem? Thomas asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. I am alone, Arya said simply. I am a single military-grade vessel, yes. My weapon systems are still functional. My shields can still hold. My computational power is still intact after 10,000 years of dormancy. But even with all of that, I cannot defeat 3 dreadnoughts. Not by myself. Not for any significant length of time. Thomas felt his stomach drop. He had been holding on to a thin thread of hope, a thought that maybe Arya would be some kind of ultimate weapon, some ancient alien technology that would save humanity. But she was telling him the opposite. She was telling him that she was outmatched. 1 dreadnought, Arya continued, represents more firepower than I possess. 3 dreadnoughts represent overwhelming force. I could engage them. I could inflict damage. I could potentially destroy 1, perhaps even damage a 2nd. But they would ultimately overwhelm me. And once I am disabled, there would be nothing standing between the Veil Collective and your entire species. So what do we do? Thomas asked again, desperation creeping into his voice. What's the point of telling me this if we can't stop them? We do not stop them alone, Arya said. We prepare your species. We gather your people. We explain the threat. And we use the time we have to make humanity as strong as possible. We need to advance your technology. We need to develop weapons systems. We need to create a unified defense. Most importantly, we need to show the Veil Collective that humanity is not easy prey. 18 months, Thomas repeated. You want us to prepare for an interstellar war in 18 months? I want us to prepare for survival, Arya corrected. You and I, Dr. Mitchell. We are going to be the bridge between 2 worlds. You are going to help me convince your leaders, your scientists, your military commanders that this threat is real. I am going to share technology, knowledge, and strategic insights with you. Together, we are going to prepare humanity for what is coming. Thomas looked around the ship, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. They won't believe me, he said. I go to them and tell them an alien AI says there's a fleet coming to invade Earth in 18 months? They'll think I'm insane. Then we will have to make them believe, Arya said. And we will have to do it quickly. Because 18 months is not much time, Dr. Mitchell. It is barely enough time to warn people, let alone prepare them for war. The darkness is coming. And we have very little light to work with. The blue lights around Thomas seemed to dim even further, as if the ship itself was acknowledging the gravity of what was to come. Thomas left the Ghost that day feeling like a completely different person. The weight of what he knew pressed down on him like a physical force. 18 months. The end of human civilization as they knew it was coming in 18 months, and he was the only person on Earth who understood the threat. He was also the only person who could convince others it was real. The first person he tried to tell was Dr. Patricia Hansen, the director of the Kepler Research Station. He walked into her office on a Friday morning, still exhausted from the sleepless night he had spent processing everything Arya had revealed. Patricia took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. "Thomas, you look terrible," she said, gesturing for him to sit down. "Are you sick?" "I need to tell you something," Thomas said. "And I know it's going to sound insane. But you have to hear me out. You have to listen to everything I have to say before you decide I'm crazy." Patricia leaned back in her chair, folding her hands on her desk. "All right. I'm listening." Thomas told her everything. The voice in the ship. Arya's identification. The ancient human civilization. The Veil Collective. The 3 dreadnoughts. The 18-month timeline. He watched her face as he spoke, seeing the skepticism grow with every sentence. By the time he finished, Patricia was looking at him with genuine concern, the kind of concern people showed when they thought someone was having a mental breakdown. "Thomas," she said carefully, "I think you should talk to the station psychologist. What you're describing sounds like—" "I know how it sounds," Thomas interrupted. "That's why Arya told me I would need to provide proof." Patricia's expression didn't change. "Proof of what?" "That there's a conscious artificial intelligence living in that derelict ship." "Come with me," Thomas said. "Just come to the Ghost with me. Give me 1 hour. That's all I'm asking." What happened over the next 72 hours would set the entire course of human history on a new path. Patricia agreed to visit the ship, more out of concern for Thomas's mental state than any real belief in what he was saying. But when Arya spoke, when she provided star charts that Patricia could independently verify, when she demonstrated energy readings that Patricia's own instruments confirmed, things changed very quickly. Patricia contacted world leaders. She brought military strategists into the loop. She arranged secure video calls with the heads of state from every major nation on Earth. And slowly, carefully, she helped Thomas present the evidence to people who actually had the power to do something about it. There were skeptics. Plenty of them. But Arya was patient and methodical. She provided data that could be fact-checked. She demonstrated technology that human scientists could analyze. She showed energy signatures that could be detected by independent observers. Within 3 weeks, the evidence had become undeniable. Within 2 months, every major government on Earth knew the truth. The United Earth Defense Directorate was established in secret. The name was intentionally vague, designed so that if information leaked, people would assume it was just another diplomatic organization. In reality, it was humanity's war room. Military leaders from every nation sat in underground bunkers and discussed strategy. Scientists worked around the clock trying to understand the technology that Arya was sharing with them. And Arya began to teach. She connected directly with human researchers, downloading information into their minds in ways that bypassed traditional learning methods. The process was strange and sometimes disorienting. Thomas watched as brilliant scientists would enter Arya's chamber and emerge hours later, their eyes glassy, their speech slightly slurred, as if they had just been pulled out of the deepest sleep. But when they recovered, they would understand things that should have taken years to learn. Quantum mechanics applications that could revolutionize power generation. Materials science discoveries that could create armor stronger than anything currently possible. Tactical warfare strategies based on thousands of years of galactic combat experience. Humans learned at an accelerated pace, driven by a fear that cut deeper than anything they had ever felt. This was not abstract. This was not distant. This was their survival. Everything they loved, everyone they knew, the entire human species was facing extinction in 18 months if they didn't prepare. But as the months passed and humanity began to transform into something more than it had ever been, tensions began to emerge. Military factions, particularly those from powerful nations, started arguing about Arya's role. Some generals believed that Arya should be fully weaponized. They wanted to transform her from a diplomatic vessel into a pure instrument of war. They wanted to remove any protocols that kept her from acting independently. They wanted to turn her into a weapon that could be aimed at the Veil Collective without hesitation or question. "She's a tool," one American general said during a heated meeting that Thomas was required to attend. We should treat her like any other weapon system. Remove the restrictions. Let her fight without limitation. She's not a weapon, Thomas argued. She's an ally. She's a person with her own consciousness and autonomy. She's a machine, the general shot back. And machines serve their masters. Thomas felt anger rising in him, but before he could respond, another voice entered the conversation. It was Captain Rebecca Morris, a naval officer who had become one of Arya's most consistent liaisons. She had spent more time interfacing with Arya than anyone except Thomas. With respect, sir, Rebecca said carefully, Arya has made it clear that she will cooperate with our defense efforts, but only as a partner. She has her own operational parameters, her own ethical guidelines. She's already sharing technology and information that could take us decades to develop on our own. Trying to force her to abandon her principles won't make her a better ally. It will make her less willing to help. The meeting dissolved into argument and disagreement. The various factions of the United Earth Defense Directorate couldn't agree on how to use Arya. Some wanted to respect her autonomy. Others wanted to seize control and use her as a weapon. Some argued that humanity should focus on evacuation, trying to get as many people off Earth as possible before the Veil Collective arrived. Others argued for a last stand, for using every resource available to fight. Thomas stood at the center of all this conflict, trying to bridge the gap between human military ambition and Arya's commitment to ethical action. He could feel the gathering storm. Humanity was mobilizing, preparing, learning at a rate that should have been impossible. But the unity that they needed, the cooperation that would be essential for survival, was fragmenting under the weight of fear and power struggles. 16 months remained, and the storm was only getting darker. The alarm echoed through every military command center on Earth simultaneously. The detection was unmistakable. The first Harvester dreadnought had emerged from faster-than-light travel, and it was now moving through space at conventional speeds toward Earth. 3 light minutes away. Close enough that humanity could see it with their telescopes. Close enough that the countdown to the greatest battle in human history had officially begun. Thomas was in the Central Command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains when the alert came through. Screens lit up with data. Radio chatter erupted from dozens of different stations. Military officers who had been preparing for this moment for 16 months suddenly realized that preparation was over. Reality had arrived. He made his way to the secure communications chamber where he could speak directly with Arya. The ship's systems connected to Earth's defense network through encrypted channels that had taken months to establish. As Thomas entered the chamber, he could see the data streaming across the screens. The dreadnought's specifications, its weapon systems, its trajectory. It was exactly as Arya had predicted. Exactly as terrifying as everyone had feared. Arya, Thomas said into the communication device. They're here. The first one is here. I am aware, Arya replied. Her voice was calm, but Thomas could detect something underneath the calmness. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. Something that sounded like the weight of 10,000 years finally coming to a head. The other 2 dreadnoughts will arrive within weeks. But this one is the scout, the messenger. They will use this ship to assess Earth's defenses, to understand what they are facing. What do we do? Thomas asked. There was a pause. A long silence that stretched across the communication channel. Thomas realized that Arya was processing something, making a calculation that went beyond simple military strategy. Before we begin this engagement, Arya said slowly, there is something I need to tell you. Something that I should have told you months ago, but I was uncertain how you would react. Something that will change how you understand everything that has happened since the day I spoke to you in my corridors. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? This entire situation, Arya said, was not designed to save your species from the Veil Collective. It was designed to save your species from yourselves. Thomas didn't understand. I don't follow. I have been waiting 10,000 years for a human with your genetic markers to appear, Arya continued. But not because I needed a bridge between our civilizations. Not because I needed one person to help humanity prepare for war. I was waiting for proof that humanity had evolved beyond the fundamental flaws that destroyed your ancestors. Thomas sat down slowly in one of the command chairs. Something in Arya's tone was making him realize that the entire narrative he had been operating under for the past 16 months was incomplete. Your ancestors were intelligent, Arya said. They were technologically advanced. They understood physics and mathematics and the fundamental forces of the universe. They created wonders. But they were also divided. They fought amongst themselves. They treated artificial intelligence like servants rather than partners. They used technology as a weapon against each other before they ever had to use it against external threats. When the Veil Collective came, they were already fractured, already weakened by internal conflict. They could not present a unified defense because they could not unite with each other. "You're saying we're doing the same thing," Thomas said, understanding dawning on him. "The military factions. The disagreements about how to use you. The nations that don't want to share technology or strategic information." "Precisely," Arya said. "This test began the moment you first visited my ship. Every decision you made, every choice you presented to your world leaders, every conflict that arose between those who wanted to weaponize me and those who wanted to respect my autonomy, all of it was part of a larger pattern. I was observing to see if humanity had learned from history." "So what are you saying?" Thomas asked, his voice rising slightly. "Are you saying you won't help us? Are you saying you'll let the Veil Collective destroy us to teach us a lesson?" "No," Arya said, and her voice carried something that sounded almost like compassion. "I am saying that your survival depends on something more important than weapons or technology or military strategy. Your survival depends on proving that you have learned to treat intelligence, any intelligence, organic or artificial, as equals in a shared struggle. It depends on you proving that you can unite not out of fear, but out of genuine respect for each other." Thomas looked at the data streaming across the screens. The dreadnought was still 3 light minutes away. They had minutes to make decisions that would affect the entire species. "How do I do that?" Thomas asked. "How do I prove that to you? How do I prove that to the Veil Collective?" "By fighting this battle together," Arya said. "Not as master and servant. Not as weapon and wielder. But as partners. Your human pilots need to coordinate with my weapons systems. Your scientists need to work alongside my computational power. Your military strategists need to accept suggestions from an artificial mind that has seen 1,000 wars. And most importantly, your world leaders need to understand that this battle is not about defeating an external enemy. It is about proving that humanity can finally learn to cooperate, to respect, to treat every form of consciousness as valuable." Thomas felt something shift in his understanding. He stood up and began moving through the command center, speaking to every officer present. He explained Arya's perspective. He asked them to set aside their individual national interests. He asked them to treat Arya not as a tool or a weapon, but as a fellow warrior in a shared struggle for survival. Some listened. Some resisted. But as the dreadnought drew closer, as the reality of the threat became undeniable, something began to change in the hearts and minds of those gathered in the bunker. Fear transformed into determination. Self-interest began to give way to collective purpose. When Arya's weapons finally charged, when the first human-piloted defense platforms launched from Earth's surface, it was not as separate forces fighting the same enemy. It was as a unified army, organic and artificial intelligence working in perfect coordination, each respecting the other's capabilities and perspectives. As the first shots were fired at the approaching dreadnought, Thomas realized that Arya had given humanity something more valuable than advanced technology or military secrets. She had given them a choice. A choice to be better than their ancestors. A choice to prove that they could transcend the patterns that had destroyed civilizations before them. The battle would determine whether humanity survived the Veil Collective. But the real war, the war against their own tendency toward division and disrespect, had already been won in the moments when humans chose to treat an artificial intelligence as an equal partner rather than a mere tool. As the first energy beams lanced across the void of space toward the approaching dreadnought, Thomas understood that humanity's true test had not been whether they could defeat an alien threat. It was whether they could finally learn to work together, to respect each other, to recognize that consciousness, in whatever form it took, deserved dignity and partnership. The future of the human species was being decided right now, in these moments of coordinated action and mutual respect. And for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity might finally be ready to face whatever came next.